So basically this topic is on land acquisition, and it comes under your syllabus, means associated syllabus of land reforms. Okay, so land reforms. Now basically from the term itself you can understand that land acquisition is basically, try to understand that in most of the cases the land acquisition is done by the government. In most of the cases land acquisition is done by the government. Even for private entity also, if it is having any public purpose, the government support will be there in acquiring land. Okay, so basically in land acquisition, basically government, okay, forcibly acquires private property for public purpose. That's a key word. Okay, the key word is you are in acquisition, you are acquiring private property, but for what? Key word is public purpose. It should be for public purpose. Okay, it should be for public purpose. And from, I told you, during the British time, the Britishers used to acquire land for its many projects, which is only for, see, when Britishers acquired land, even though they have used the word public purpose, but actually it was not for the public, it was to serve the British interest. It was to serve the British interest. Okay, but there were actually, for, if you see the British railway, I told you the Indian railway, which was constructed by the Britishers during their time. Okay, so when they acquired land, even though the basic intention was to serve the British interest, it to a large extent that time also, even you can see that the role of railway in national integration. Railways helped Congress to help every leaders to come and meet at different, every year Congress used to meet. See, before independence, there was only one party which was fighting for the, means in reality, okay, there are smaller parties out there that you'll study, but in reality, so these Congress, if you see that I'm just telling how railways have benefited the national movement. Okay, it helped the leaders to travel and meet at different places. Okay, so in that way, indirectly, railways have contributed in national awakening, especially for the leaders to meet together, share their ideas, and come in a common platform. Okay, so basically this key word is never miss it. Okay, if you no need to use the word forcibly. Okay, because that is the word we use it till this, before this 2013 Act. Okay, so anyway, but actually, even if you are saying that I will not give you a land, also government will take it. Okay, so because the government is backed by a law, and if you go to the court also, court will say that whether there is a law is there, and legally law is there, and the government is following that law only. Okay, so it is like if you are not ready to give up it also, that you can see it also that C-Marty was creating many problems. Okay, even C-Marty was so rich also, C-Marty was not ready to give up that land, that when this metro thing, so they were, if you see the metro, how it is, it's a very powerful, a big business person in Kochi, but no other option to give it up the land, because there is no other option, that track can be only moved to that way. So it's basically, it's acquiring land for a purpose, acquiring land for a public purpose. So that's the definition. Okay, so you need to understand that at this word, see, without mentioning this word public purpose, most of the time, especially in land acquisition, public purpose prevail over your private interest. In land acquisition, public purpose, but you have to prove that this acquisition is for purpose only. You cannot like on the just for namesake, you cannot acquire land by using the name public purpose and giving that land to a private developer. That is now not possible. Now we have to start from this. Okay, so earlier during the British period, okay, this 1894 Act had many problems. 1894 Act had many problems. Obviously, there will be a problem. Why? When Britishers enacted this law, I told you the basic purpose was British interest, and only one thing was there in 1894 Act, that is in relation to compensation. The act which continued. See, even though it was enacted by the Britishers after independence, till 2013, we continued this act. And this act was the major act for the central government to acquire, and the state government also on this by using they had their own act. Okay, and all were on the similar line. So not only this land, so it's the main prime act to acquire land, prime act, and the basic purpose of this 1894 act was to acquire land for public purpose, and the people affected by this acquisition, they will be given monetary compensation, okay. So at that time in the 1894 act, okay, the specific purpose, that public purpose includes urban expansion, infrastructure development and industrialization, okay. Now other than this, now this is a very key thing you can note down, other than this 1894 act, there are 16 central acts, 16 central acts, even though, even it is not directly associated with land acquisition, but in that 16 central acts, there is a provision to acquire land. For example, Special Economic Zone Act. Okay, you will study Special Economic Zone under investment model. So, Special Economic Zone Act, which talks about developing Special Economic Zone, has a provision to acquire land, because if you want to develop a Special Economic Zone, you require land. The land acquisition is there. A Special Economic Zone should be considered from the public purpose point of view, larger national interest point of view. So then Railways Act, okay. So many acts like National Highways, Railways Act, okay, all these specific sectors, 16 acts also talks about. So land acquisition is not the only act which deals with land acquisition. There are other acts also, specific sectoral act, that for a particular sector. In that law, there is a provision for acquiring land. Now, so the biggest criticism of this 1894 act is that it didn't have the features of rehabilitation and resettlement provision. In the 1894 act, there was no provision of rehabilitation and resettlement. Only thing in the 1894 act was there is in relation to monetary compensation. Okay. So, and in some cases, okay, so basically this land, okay, is primarily, this land acquisition is in, if you look from a public purpose angle, it is basically used as a part of distributive justice, which comes under social justice. In the sense that, okay, social justice is very important. I think tomorrow you are having your social justice chapter. Okay, so social justice is important not only from your that 4 questions, okay. Social justice is important from your essay as well as from the ethics point of view. Okay, so that's a very important area. So even the 4 modules are there, but very important for you both the parts. So be very careful when you read the material and how to use it. So now distributive justice means, okay, you acquiring the land and you are not distributing that land to someone else, but when it becomes a public property, okay. Now metro, you can use the metro. When it was a private property, you can't use it. You cannot allow it. How can you enter a private property? Private property means that property you need the permission to enter his house or enter his area. Now it is a public property. Do you require anyone's permission to use this metro? It has become a public property. It is for a public purpose, okay. So the basic aim of this tool is distributive justice, but once this tool is used for exploitation, that's a big concern. Even though this tool was used for distributive justice, but actually this 1894 act most of the time have resulted in injustice, not justice. Okay, so normally to attain this, so what generally every goal as a tool to attain this distributive justice will always have some safeguards. To attain the goal of distributive justice, every land acquisition act have 2 important goals. So for example, okay, in our land acquisition act, we had 2 inbuilt safeguards to attain the goal of distributive justice. One safeguard is in relation to compensation. That the person who are affected by the who lost the land, he will be compensated. Okay, so, and second safeguard is that no acquisition is permissible except for public purpose. So two safeguard, inbuilt safeguard is that acquisition can be only for public purposes, and the acquisition has to be, or the people who are affected by the law, this land acquisition should be compensated. So the word, okay, the fair, actually whether the compensation was fair, that was a question mark. So 1894 compensation was not a fair compensation. It was only compensated. Whether the owner is satisfied by the compensation, that is a big question mark. But in the 1894 Act, they were, and every act should have these two features, that the purpose should be for public purpose, not for any private interest, okay. And if it's see, private company also will acquire land, but that land should serve some public purpose, public interest. If the private company is acquiring land, by fully using this law, it should serve the public purpose. That project should serve the public interest. Okay, so that you keep in mind. Okay, so basically these two inbuilt features was there in our 1894 Act, but you know the problem with our law, na? Every law, our laws are most of the cases progressive. Now my question is, with Right to Information Act is one of the most progressive law the country ever had. But whether this law is being properly implemented, properly used, only few people using it, and now there is the machinery itself, government machinery is resisting to implement this law. We have Domestic Violence Act, a very progressive law, but it means that we almost more than 10 years have been passed. So any difference in the domestic violence? So the law to be successful, most important thing is that awareness. There are many factors there. Okay, most important factor is proper implementation. It should be implemented. But if you want to implement any law, the basic thing is that awareness creation is very important. Okay, how many of the people knows about there is an act called Domestic Violence Act, and it protects you from any form of domestic violence? Very few people knows it. Okay, so similarly regarding this, in the earlier cases, when the state or the state representative come and deal with it, basically when the state comes to you, you will feel you can't do anything. The state themselves is coming and acquiring your land. So the compensation is whether sufficient or fair, there is a question mark over there. Okay, but anyway, what I'm trying to say is that it was there in the 1894 Act. These two features were there, but many of the time there were a lot of criticism regarding, because it have violated human rights, because your property have been taken away forcibly without your permission. So that has been and the thing is that, and there were no procedure was adopted, no common procedure, and the displaced people were not properly rehabilitated and resettled. That was the biggest concern. And so along with that, in the earlier act, we are talking about the 1894 Act. So in the 1894 Act, most of the time have resulted in human rights violation, because the displacement of the people who were displaced after this acquisition, they were not rehabilitated and resettled, and no social impact survey have been conducted, no social impact assessment have been conducted in the 1894 Act, and it does not provide any kind of protection other than monetary compensation, especially for the people who have lost the land. So these were the criticism against 1894 Act. So in order to address these concerns, in order to address these problems associated with the 1894 Land Acquisition Act, in 2000, see in 2011 it tried, but finally it got passed in 2013. In 2013, a very important and progressive act, what is called as, from the term itself you will understand that what this act is intending to. It will ensure compensation will be fair. So we will see that what is the provision in this act which ensure fair compensation. So there is a provision in the law which ensure you compensation, and there is also a provision that transparency will be there in land acquisition. Now transparency means everybody will be knowing it, okay, this land acquisition is happening, this is the compensation, this is the procedure to acquire the land, and the guarantee is that there will be rehabilitation and resettlement under this act. So all the features have been inbuilt in the 2013 act, which have come into force on 1st January 2014. Okay. Now, so the first important concern is that it has replaced the old archaical law, but 1894 law, it was replaced 1894 law. Second, the features of rehabilitation and resettlement was inbuilt with this act, and most importantly, it involves the process of land acquisition import. See, this point is very important. This process of land acquisition involved, firstly it starts with, before land acquisition, there will be a assessment, social impact assessment will be made, and based on the social impact assessment survey, first, after the social impact, try to understand that after the social impact survey only, and if the survey gives a green signal, then only the government will notify the intent for acquisition. Okay, so it's a procedure first. Second procedure is preliminary notification, and then after the notification, then there will be a declaration will be made regarding acquisition, and finally compensation will be paid. And here the interesting feature about this act is that it is not only giving compensation, and they will tell the time limit. By this time, the people affected will be compensated, which was not there. This is the first feature of a fair compensation. If I am telling you, I will give you 10 lakhs, and I am giving you after 10 years. I am giving you. What is the point? Government is telling you, I am going to give you 10 lakhs, and they have given you check. Okay, but when you go and use the check, they are saying that you cannot use it now. You come after certain months or certain periods. So that's not a fair compensation. Okay. So fair in the sense that you should get, at least the value should be in relation to the market value. What is the present market value of your property? Plus you should get the compensation on time itself. So that's been the process. Okay. So basically the social, we already discussed that social impact assessment is survey is being done to identify the people who are being affected by this land, and how much, what is the, at what deep level it will get impacted. I define the people because if you identify the people only, and you have to make a plan for their rehabilitation and resettlement. Okay, so that's key thing you keep in mind. And impact survey, this impact survey has to be done not by the government, not by any other agency, but by an independent party where the people have confidence. Okay, an independent party will do the survey, and since it is transparent, it should be shared with the public. So what is the first process before land acquisition? It is the social impact survey. So this survey done by a party has to be made public. People should know that why the government is going to, it's just not started the process. Why their land is required by the government. What is the purpose of it? And how they will be benefited by this project. So that will be, so it will, this information will be shared with the public before seeking their consent for acquiring their land. Before making any declaration of acquisition, this has to be, this data which being taken by the independent party has to be shared. That's a very important process. Okay. And after that, this is very important. Okay. So for rural and urban area, the compensation is different. So key thing, okay, key feature as part of fair compensation. Okay. So compensation is, what is the market value? What is the market value? So normally, how will you find out the market value of a property? If I am saying that, okay, that particular, I'll tell you the that land, the opposite to that, if this What is the opposite to that? One property is there, na? Just imagine, okay. So that property was sold last month. Imagine that it was having 4 cent of land, and it was sold for 1 crore. Imagine. Okay, so we say that, okay, so here in this area, the market value for 1 cent is 25 lakh. So that is, so why, from the recent transaction only, we will decide, okay, you also say that now when you want to buy a property or when you want to sell a property, you will say that my neighbor's land was sold for at this rate only, so I want this rate. So similarly, that's the way you calculate the market value, okay. So because we'll discuss, that is one of the issues associated with this particular law. So the rural area people will get 4 times monetary compensation for their market value, and urban area people will get, because urban area price will be much more higher, will get only 2 times the market value. So don't get, it is not equal, okay. And urban area land is more costlier than rural area, you know it very well. So that is one of the very important feature of this, the compensation is, in this way it is fair. It is a higher compensation, the compensation is very high. So the people, so this act basically is concerned, highly concerned with the people being impacted, because compensation is very high, which was not there, this was not there, even though the earlier act, 1894 act talks about compensation, it have never said how much percentage we will give you. It said that it will be compensated. That's it, monetary compensation, okay. But here it is crystal clear, it is saying that after the proper procedure of impact survey, making it public, finally when we acquire your land, after notification, everything, when you acquire land, if your land is in rural area, you will get 4 times the market value, and government will announce, okay, this is the market value for this particular property, 4 times, and if it is for urban area, it will be 2 times. So that feature you need to note down. And this is very, 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 very important, okay. The consent, okay, the consent is required. Consent is required for land acquisition. So after the survey, the consent, okay, if the land is being acquired for these 2 purposes, okay, if the land acquired is for private, for any private company or for PPP project, if any private company or for any PPP project means public private partnership project, we will be studying detailedly under investment model, okay. This concept we will study in detail in the coming classes, okay. So if the land acquisition is for any public private partnership project or for private companies, the act says that, this is very, very, very important provision of the law, you require 80% of the people consent. 80% of the people who are being impacted by this land or displaced people, their consent is required, okay, and it is, the consent rate, the percentage is quite high, okay. So that this key feature you keep in mind. And this says that, okay, this act and regarding this consent of 80%, the consent of 80% will not be applicable. So this will be applicable for private companies, consent of 80% will be applicable for private companies as well as for PPP projects. But for the 16 acts, we discussed that there are 16 central acts which have a provision of land acquisition. Okay, and if the land is being acquired for under these 16 acts like Railways Act, Special Economic Zone Act, Atomic Energy Act, then it will not apply. This 80% consent will not apply for land acquisition under the 16 central legislations like Atomic Energy Act, Railways Act, as well as Special Economic Zone Act, etc. So this 80% consent is mainly for PPP projects as well as land for private companies. So that you keep in mind, okay. And this is one of the most important issues. This market value and consent of 80% for PPP and private companies is a very big concern. We'll discuss that, okay.